So welcome, Mr. Cerrell.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So our first question is, can you tell us a little bit about why entrepreneurs and philanthropists are so important to global development?
Well, I think, first of all, on philanthropy, at least the view that we take at the Gates Foundation, is that philanthropy can typically take many more risks than governments or academia. They can afford to invest in things that have a longer-term development, or they can take investments in things that may likely fail. A great example of that is a malaria vaccine. And we took a bet about 10 years ago in the development of a malaria vaccine that GSK was a real leader in. And it's a good example of where a lot of people said it would be very difficult to develop a vaccine for malaria. But just recently, GSK announced that they in fact did develop this very effective vaccine. And it's the kind of thing that philanthropy can do that sometimes governments won't.
And in terms of sectors that you aim for, what type of sectors do you work with? Who do you work with in those sectors? And how are you trying to influence their thinking?
Well, the sector we work mostly with at the Gates Foundation is the R&D community. So these are this is the drug companies, researchers, others from around the world who are investing in new tools that can help save lives tomorrow. And so I gave you one example about malaria vaccine. But here in the European office, the sector we work mostly with is with government. Governments around the world every year spend about $134 billion on what we call foreign aid. So this is money that goes from rich countries to poor countries to help on things like health and improving agriculture. The Gates Foundation, in contrast, although many people think it's a very large institution, is only about $4 billion a year. Still large, but so we see the opportunity really in helping to leverage how governments allocate that $134 billion so that it can be used to the greatest effect, so that we can really track and make sure that those monies help save lives, that they can help improve farmer productivity, that they can help make the world a better place for children, particularly in developing countries. And
you've mentioned malaria and helping children. Are there any other particular sort of projects that you're particularly proud of that you're developing now in Europe and the Middle East, which you're really focusing on right now?
Well, the one that we're focused hardest on at the Foundation is the eradication of polio. We think between now and 2018, we have a really great chance of one day being able to say we have wiped this disease from the face of the earth, which would be the only second disease that we've been able to eradicate behind smallpox. We have a costed plan. We helped raise about $4 billion of a ask that's about $5 billion. And so we think we're well on our way, and we're very excited about the potential of one day saying that we will be a polio-free world.
And what particular difficulties do you find when you try and allocate resources? I mean, obviously there are many good causes in the world, and we would like to solve as many of them as possible. But how do you sort of get a good mixture of idealism and pragmatism into what you do?
We focus on the areas that have the highest degree of neglect and the areas that really pose the greatest human suffering. And so that really has taken us very squarely into the area of health. And we've seen that when you don't have access to decent health care, that millions of children die needlessly, and oftentimes from diseases that have long ago been eradicated in places like the UK or the US. In 1960, there were about 20 million children who died before the age of 5. Today, we've reduced that number to 6.5 million. So we really focus on those things where we know with simple interventions, very inexpensive interventions, we can save a lot of lives. And so we try to take in a sense, an investment approach where we can have the maximum impact in the mission that we're trying to pursue.
And in terms of you and the role that you play at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, day to day, week to week, month to month, what do you find most challenging about your role?
Well, a lot of what I do is try to spend time working in government ministries, convincing policymakers that the tiny amounts of money that they're spending on aid is having a tremendous impact, and that even in a time of economic circumstances as dire as the one we're facing, that these very modest portions of the spending that goes towards aid is really still something that they should maintain. And what the politicians say is they may agree, but that the public doesn't believe it, so they can't vote for it. And so our job is really to help shine a light on the things that we know will help save lives, even if times seem tight, and to make sure that we don't interrupt the pace of progress that we're seeing on these issues.
In the current economic environment, have you found it harder to convince politicians to get on board, to tackle problems and so forth, and other people? I mean, how much harder has it become with the current belt tightening and so forth?
It's incredibly hard. It is. There's no doubt that we spend a lot of time, again, trying to make this case about why it still matters in tough circumstances. But if people saw what was happening, and if people knew actually the undeniable truth that aid represents a tiny portion and that much of it is really working, then they'd be more inclined to support it, because we can't afford it, and we're not going to be able to balance budgets on the backs of the world's poorest by cutting off aid. So we think that the argument is still a very good one, but there's no doubt that the times are difficult right now, and people see real trade-offs that need to be made, and so it makes our job a little bit more challenging to try to make those arguments.
And what do you find is the most rewarding aspect of your job? Are there any particular moments in working for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation where after a day's work you felt wow, and you sort of punched the air, or?
Well, there's a lot of the work that you do from your desk and working in various capitals around Europe, and I think the real benefit is when you actually go into the field and you see the progress that's being made. I had an experience when I went to northern Ghana in 2008, and we visited some of the programs that we were funding in the region, and one was being operated by the Carter Center, an organization that was set up by the former U.S. president, and they were working to eradicate guinea worm in the region. Mm-hmm. And you saw how the suffering is just deplorable, and how it's a disease that's long ago been eradicated in a lot of rich countries, but still was claiming a lot of victims and a lot of needless suffering. Today, guinea worm's been wiped out in Ghana, and so those are the kinds of moments that I think really make you believe that so much is possible if we just stay the course and do what we know can help people who are less fortunate than we are.
Great, thank you very much. That was a wonderful interview.
Great.